Now a reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I will be the first to admit, the Red Hen story, a little convoluted. It wasn't as smooth as I imagined it would be. But I think my point still got across at least a little bit. In the story we're hearing from the gospel today, Jesus is talking to a crowd. Jesus is a rabbi, a prophet, being wise, telling them how they ought to live their lives. And a man comes to the crowd, and the way I read it, imagine he's pushing through. He's got some urgency. And he says, "Teacher, my brother owes me money." Imagine having an audience with Jesus Christ. And this is what you bring. Now, this man didn't know Jesus Christ was Jesus Christ, the Messiah. This man imagined Jesus as a rabbi, a prophet, someone at least in tune with God. But even still, this man brought kind of an odd request to Jesus. "Tell my brother to cut me in on the inheritance." And Jesus' response is a little bit frustrated. "Me? Pal, I am not a lawyer. I don't know why you're coming to me with this. This is not the time or place. But since you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. Let's talk about greed." But I wonder, why did this man come to Jesus with this? The more I pondered about it and thought about it, I thought, this man, who's frustrated because he didn't have what belonged to him, he didn't have the money that he thought he deserved. He didn't go to a magistrate. He didn't go to a lawyer or an arbitrator or any government or judiciary official. He went to Jesus, a man of God. Why? Because this man saw money as a divine issue. He saw his deservedness to money as a God-given right. He had made an idol of money, and he thought that God should intervene in this petty family affair so that he should get what belonged to him. Is it wrong to want an inheritance? No. Is it wrong to equate it to a problem of God? Perhaps. And Jesus addresses this. He says, "Guard yourselves against all kinds of greed." And he goes into a parable. And in this parable, there is a man, a very wealthy man. His crops had produced an abundance. What a blessing when that happens. I imagine in a farming community, we're aware of what a blessing it is when farms produce an abundance. It's better for everybody. Except in this case, it wasn't. It was better for this man. We remember in this 1st century AD, in this part of the world, food was a scarcity. And the act of making food, the act of eating, and the act of being fed is a repeated thing in the Bible. When Jesus feeds the 5,000, people are so impressed, they want to make him the king. Of course, Jesus rejects a kingship. Jesus celebrates the Last Supper with his disciples. They're constantly going to people's houses and eating. And it's a big deal because there's not enough. People are being starved. They're being overtaxed by an empire and overtithed by a corrupt religious establishment. They don't have enough. And in this story, there's a man not just with enough, too much. His barns that he can't contain the amount that he has produced. And in a land with so much need, so many hungry mouths, what does he decide to do? Build bigger. He decides to tear down his barn and build bigger barns and fill those with his abundance. And he fills them with his crops. What can he do? He can sell it piecemeal. He has risen up the price of the crops because of the scarcity, so he can sell it for whatever cost he wants. And he's living large, right? He's doing great. And he knows he can retire early. And he can eat, he can drink, and he can partake in all kinds of greed. What kinds of greed are there? Eating, drinking. I imagine, and I bet you can imagine, there are many other kinds of greed that can easily lead to vices. And they are all available to this man who has everything. And he is excited. He's excited to begin his early retirement and enjoy this amazing life that he's built for himself. And then he dies. And he's worked his whole life to hoard all this wealth to himself, while his neighbors, his kin people, his family perhaps, they all have nothing. Some less than nothing. Some have sold themselves into slavery to pay their family debts. Some families have to sell their children into slavery to pay debts. And here is a man who has too much and will never see it. And it makes me wonder, what part of the story is the sin? Where did he go wrong? Is it wrong to save money? No, it's not wrong to save money. Is it wrong to build stores for more abundance? No, that's not wrong. Shrewd business practices? That's not wrong. Think of the story of Joseph in Egypt. He had a prophecy that there would be a famine, that the crops are going to fail, that the cows are going to die, it's going to be really bad. He tells Pharaoh. And what do? They do pretty much exactly what this guy in the parable is doing, with one different detail. At the end of the famine, they had all their stores saved up, and they were able to feed themselves and their neighbors. Now, what if this man in the parable, with his shrewd, amazing business practices, did produce abundance, did tear down his barns, did erect bigger barns, did fill those up, and then distributed the foods to the people who needed it? But isn't a man worthy of the sweat of his own brow? He worked for it. They didn't work for it. They don't deserve it. We love to think about how much people don't deserve, how much they haven't worked for it, how much freeloaders just want to get by on what someone else has worked for. We love to talk about that. Interestingly, the people who love to talk about that also love to call themselves Christians. I wonder, have they read this parable? Because the thing for this man to do was not to store up what he worked so hard for, it was to distribute more. It was to be generous. We see the abundance that this man has produced, and we think, what a blessing. I say, that's not the blessing. Getting an abundance, not a blessing. It is the potential for a blessing. Because this man could have changed lives. He could have saved a child's life who might have starved to death in that area. He might have fed a widow who had no way to collect any kind of wealth for herself or feed herself. He might have adopted orphans. He might have started another synagogue or another temple where people could come and be housed and be healthy and be happy. No, he stored it up and he died and he got nothing. He didn't make of his abundance a blessing. He made of it a curse to his townspeople. Does that mean we should give away everything that we have so that we can take our blessings and make them bigger blessings? No, keep what you need. We are not in a religion of asceticism. Asceticism being a way of living where you reject all pleasures, all happiness, all anything like that. But we are in a religion of generosity, and we are in a religion of not asking who deserves it. Because if we start getting on the path of asking who deserves it, who has worked hard enough, who has earned this, we better also be asking, have we earned anything? Do we really think that we are worthy of God's love? We love to be angry and pessimistic about human beings as being fallen creatures. And yet, we never ask, we are undeserving of grace. So we should give to those undeserving of grace in our lives. In Christianity, there should be no language about who deserves and who doesn't deserve. We should not be worried about who is taking advantage. There will always be people taking advantage. It always happens. Judas took advantage. Jesus still fed him at the Last Supper. So what does this all mean? What do we do with our wealth and what we consider to be a blessing? I was reading an article this morning. I found it to be really sad but really interesting. In Illinois, someone just won $1.2 billion in the lottery. Is it a blessing? I wonder. A lot of people would think so. A lot of people would say, wow, imagine how great his life is going to be. 70% of lottery winners go broke in 3 years. A third of lottery winners go bankrupt, which means not only do they not have their lottery winnings at the end of those 3 years, they had less than that. Half of people who win the lottery wish that they hadn't. Why? People come out of the woodwork, start asking for all their money. They start spending their money on things they can't actually afford. We like to imagine, if you want $1 million, you buy $1 million house. No one says anything about property taxes and insurance and blah, 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 blah. These people have terrible lives. Why? It's exciting, I imagine, to get a lot of money. If you've ever come into a surprise amount of money, that's, it's nice to print out the ATM receipts and just, and walk around town very, very happy. We just sold our house, and I did that for like 18 hours straight, strutting it. Yeah. Well, what would it be like if the person who wins $1 million in lottery, they decide to donate several $100,000 to an orphanage that's underfunded? What if a person wins $1,000 and they take that money and they pay off school lunch debt so that parents don't have to risk having CPS call on them because they're poor? What if it was something even more innocuous than that? What if you had $200 that you could use to spend on something nice and shiny for yourself, or you could use to help sponsor the Sheraton Color Guard team who can't afford their own uniforms and their own flags, their own rifles, and have to search for sponsors? That's a real thing here. That is a blessing. That's where the blessing is. Now, I need to make a confession. I've been out with COVID for a couple weeks. It wasn't super awful. I was a little snotty. I was a little, groggy and everything. But I get weird when I'm not out and about. I have this thing. If I don't make someone laugh in 48 hours, I start to get really weird. So, I wasn't bathing. I was just laying in bed, basting in my own juices. I was scrawling the days in the wall, and Rachel's like, we have a calendar. I got this really bad habit of shopping on Amazon because I couldn't go out shopping. Anybody have that bad habit? Rachel was watching out the window like the neighbors are going to think that we are the worst. Because the male people here, they actually walk to the houses. And so there's a guy doing one of these with all the boxes. I spent more money than I should have spent on Amazon. And I didn't like looking at my bank statement. And you know what? Since I bought that stuff on Amazon, I've hardly used it. I bought silly things. It is silly, and I still think it's cool. It's a tambourine that goes on your toes. And so when I'm playing guitar, I can also play tambourine. COVID does weird things to people. I actually did that. It hasn't enriched my life in any meaningful way. I have a tambourine already that I could just step on. I wanted one to go on my toes. What if I had spent that money on something more meaningful? Something that was a blessing to other people? What if I had, driven through a coffee shop and paid for the person behind me? That's a blessing. Has that ever happened to you? That's never happened to you? It's amazing. It's life-changing. It's amazing what buying one person a Frappuccino does to their entire day. And they'll remember that on their deathbed. I will when it happened to me. The point I'm trying to make is that we when we have an abundance, that isn't the blessing. When we realize that we have this big house and we have all this excess and abundance that we can do whatever we want with, that's not where the blessing is. God has not blessed this person with the abundance of their crops. He blessed this person with the opportunity to make something bigger. When he died, it didn't matter. But imagine the legacy he would have left behind if he saved lives. Further on in Luke, they talk about not building yourself a temporary purse, but building yourself a more permanent purse. What does Jesus mean by that? Blessing the world with what you have. This earth does not belong to us. We are renters. If you've ever rented a place and then gone through trying to get your deposit back, you know how hard that can be. We are renters, and we're tasked to be good stewards. And God is going to look at this earth and our abundance, what we've done with it, with a fine-tooth comb. And when we come face to face with God, what legacy will we have left? Did we feed anybody? Did we welcome people into this church, or did we push them away? Did we embrace people? Did we believe them when they said they were suffering? Did we ask them, what have you done to earn it? What are you going to do to earn it? Do you deserve this? We packed boxes this morning. If you weren't here for the Christmas in July, we packed 35 boxes full of stuff to give to people. There is no test to who gets those boxes, whether or not they deserve it. I don't care if someone pulls up in a Mercedes and loads 5 boxes into there. That's not our business. Our business is doing the work. So, when we give, and this is not like a come around like give all your money to the church sermon. This is when we give in our daily lives, even in the smallest ways, with our abundance. Let's do so because it's the right thing to do. Let's not ask, what is it that belongs to me and how can I get more, God? But ask, what do I have already, God? And how can I use it to be a source of blessing for others? Amen.